camping, laning, hard scoping, bunkering. All labels I've heard from players who are frustrated because they keep getting their head taken off from a 4-foot pokey thing with a scope. It's very easy to understand why it's so frustrating to try to attack these types of players, and it's also even easier to see why it's such an effective strategy. Rather than try to play the aggressive ape game, let's sit way in the back where we've got the comfort of range and precision damage to take care of our enemies. Trying to engage it in a one-on-one situation or a team v team situation essentially turns into a sophisticated pissing contest. Both teams are essentially trying to do the same thing, so it essentially comes down to which team can do it better. And if your team isn't skilled for sniping, what the hell do you do? How do you take care of a team that's sitting so far in the back of the map that even a pulse rifle is starting to get damage drop off? Today, I'm going to teach you some strategies. I'm going to teach you a specific tactic that can help you counter this playstyle. And the really cool thing is, even the big streamers like Cammy Cakes, Drewsky, True Vanguard, they use this tactic without even necessarily being completely conscious of it, and I guarantee you do too. It's a strategy that we call Wolfpack, and a tactic we know as the suppress and flank. Welcome back, Guardians, to another Dream Team video. I'm your humble host, Meeson777, and welcome to a new series we are starting calling Wolfpack for Dummies. In this series, which we will be putting out every single Monday, we are going to explain some of the tactics that we use within our strategy we call Wolfpack. And if you don't know what that means, or if you think it's some type of r/I'm14 and this is deep, I highly recommend that you go watch this video right here. This video will tell you about what the basics of the Wolfpack strategy are and how you can get plugged into what roles specifically you fill within a team. It's a bit of a prereq to this course if you were to consider this sort of like a class education type course, so a lot of the stuff is about to not make sense if you haven't seen it, so do yourself a favor. Timestamps for all sections of this video should be in the description, so if you have a particular area that you want to focus on, you can check that out in order to get yourself the best education possible. Okay, let's begin with what a suppress and flank by definition is. A suppress and flank is a response tactic to enemy contact and encampment, in which the alphas and betas break off from the rest of the team and attempt to get an alternate angle on the enemy. Gammas and omegas during this time supply suppressive fire to the enemies with the intent of maintaining aggro. Once the flankers are in position, they call ready. The suppressors respond with ready. The flankers then dive, calling push, in which both parties then aggress towards the enemy. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, this is something I do on a regular basis with my team anyway. Sometimes I don't even call this out, and that's exactly the point. Just like how Isaac Newton didn't invent gravity, he merely discovered it and put it down onto paper, that's what Wolfpack is. This strategy is something that players use all the time. The best teams you will see coordinate a suppress and flank all the time. Some of your teams probably do it just as well, but the bonus that you get out of having it codified in the back of your mind and with your team is it means both parties, whether you're on the flanking team or the suppressing team, know what they have to do before they actually do it. Both teams are capable of snapping immediately into action and are able to predict what the other party is going to do before they actually do it. It keeps everybody on the same page, which at the end of the day means you're more lethal. This strategy is incredibly good for, like we mentioned, breaking up bunkers, breaking up what we call an Alamo. It's one of these types of strategies that is also a pretty solid way to just generally initiate a fight. Even if the enemy is not necessarily holding the back foot, it's something that you can initiate just in order to get a little bit of an advantage on the enemy team. Let's talk about some of the mechanics. Step number 1, see the enemy. Locate where the enemy's positioned at. Generally get an idea, and if you can get a head count of how many enemies there are, let's say it's comp and you see 3, great. If you see, say, 2 enemies, that means that somebody might be flanking your team as you speak, so it might be more beneficial to perhaps wait it out. Secondly, plan. Call out that you would like to do a suppress and flank. If your team is already on the same page as you of doing Wolfpack tactics to begin with, they should already know if they are a Gamma or an Omega, they should start moving themselves into a suppressing position. And of course the Alphas and Betas should move into the flanking position. Generally speaking, it's good for whoever calls the suppress and flank, the main flanker, or the main suppressor. So for example, if an alpha or beta says suppress and flank, I'm going right, that gives the suppressing team an idea of who it is exactly they need to be listening for the next few calls. On the other side of things, let's say a gamma or an omega calls it out, then it's up to the responsibility of one of the front lines to say, copy, I'm flanking left, I'm flanking right, I'm going through here, whatever it may be. Step number 3, the trigger. This is the simple call of saying ready. Your alphas and your betas should be looking to give this call as quickly as possible. As soon as they have positioned themselves in a way where they are able to see the enemies from a different angle that the other suppressing team is not currently engaging them from, and they are in a position that is generally pretty safe, something that they're not going to get blasted out of immediately, they should call ready. The suppressing team should be quick to respond with ready or not ready. Something to give the flanking team the idea that either it is a go or that they might have to hold their ground for a second while the suppressor team deals with whatever's happening. Once the ready call is given, let's assume both teams have given the go-ahead, then the call for push. The flanking team needs to be very aggressive at this point, trying to capitalize on the drawn aggro of the enemy team. At this point, it just comes down to step number 4, which is executing. Kill the enemies as best as you possibly can. I know it's easier said than done. The big thing to remember here is that the flanking team has to be bold, but not stupid. The suppressing team has to try to maintain as much aggro as they possibly can. So if the enemy team starts to pull out, maybe stop engaging on that suppressing team, they need to do their best to either call it out like, hey, somebody's looking for you, or B, they need to get that aggro back on them immediately.
So when should I start a suppression flank?
That's a great starting question. Generally speaking, you should be looking for opportunities to perform a suppressant flank, as generally having any sort of plan at all is better than having no plan whatsoever. It's more a matter of when it's not a good idea to have a suppressant flank, because sometimes the enemy team just will straight up deny you every single time. So if you see this happening a lot, your flanker's getting his ass beat every single time he goes for it, probably best to pull off the strategy. But until then, keep giving it a go until the enemy adapts to you.
What should I do as the flanker if I get pushed?
Getting pushed is a reality you're going to have to face as a flanker. Generally speaking, you should be in a position where you can punish if somebody decides they want to aggress you with just raw apish aggression. So you should have the tools already to handle something like that. But worst case scenario, let's say that all 3 of the enemy closes in on you. It's then essentially a reverse suppressant flank. Try to get yourself into a defendable position as best as you possibly can, but then at that point the suppressors should pretty much just operate as the flankers and close in the fight.
Which role is best for suppressant flank?
Alphas by far are the best role to do the flanking, as typically they're going to be spec'd out with both close range and speed type tools to be able to get themselves into the position quickly and then capitalize on it as soon as they get there. That's not to say that betas can't, it's just that alphas have a slight edge on it. Whenever I play beta, I typically have some form of like break the fight up, so something like invisibility. You can use those types of things to actually get into the fight a little bit easier as well as a beta. In terms of the actual suppressing side of things, it goes without saying that the gamma is an absolute awesome pick for doing something like that. Sometimes you might not have a gamma on your team, so something like the beta or the omega should probably be in its stead. If you happen to only have betas, then just pick whatever beta you think is best suited for the job and just go from there.
Does your mom suppression flank?
Hey Ma, do you do suppressant flanks?
No,
Not a little bit?
never.
Oh.
Why would I?
I just thought people wanted to know.
Thought it was a pancake.
How do I beat a suppressant flank?
Ah, I knew this question would come up. The best way to counter a suppressant flank is to do what we call a turn and burn, which we will cover in future videos. The short version is see the flanker, kill the flanker as quickly as possible with all units.
How much suppression should I give?
The best way to actually suppress might not be the way that you might traditionally think. Destiny's an interesting game in that we have a lot of health, and the health tends to come back pretty quickly. So typically speaking, you want to keep the fight engaged as best as you possibly can, giving your opponents some room to take some shots on you, but not quite enough to kill you. Of course, if you can just kill the enemy outright, then great. The best thing you really want to do here is to try to close out those angles. So if they start to engage on you, you rip them up real good and they take an angle around a piece of cover. See if you can pivot that cover a little bit to keep them pinned in that corner until the flank comes.
If I'm flanking, what weapons should I use? And why is it Fellwinter's?
Yes. Yeah, the Fellwinters is a pretty obvious pick for the flankers, and it essentially encompasses the idea of what the flankers are looking for, and pretty much what the flankers are looking for or what the suppressors are not looking for, and vice versa. So, for example, the suppressors are looking for weapons that are generally mid to long range with very consistent but sometimes slower DPS, things like pulse rifles, auto rifles, scout rifles, things you can consistently tag enemies for. Sniper rifles, of course, work well too, but generally you might find yourself actually discouraging the suppression because they might just say, nope, not going to challenge that sniper lane, thank you very much, and they might just kill your flanker. So you want to give them pressure without scaring them away entirely and, not engaging with you, because the whole goal of the suppression is for them to engage you or for them to just hold cover. The very clear de facto weapon for suppression is the sweet business. Things like the vigilance wing work really well too. Anything that can give really good consistent DPS with a lot of bullets, a thick magazine at medium to long range. And the inverse goes for the flankers. So you want things that are good within close range spaces and kill very quickly. So things like sidearms, hand cannons, shotguns, even fusion rifles. Anything along those lines is what you're looking for as a flanker. Some weapons to keep in mind in particular that can be quite effective are weapons that can kind of roll one person into the next. So things like Crimson. You can even do something crazy like Tommy's Matchbook. I personally love to use the Rat King. It's an awesome kinetic sidearm. Anything along those lines is what you're generally looking for. I hope that helps. I hope the next time you come up against some people who are just laning you hard and aren't giving you the time of day, this might help you break that up a little bit. If you are interested in learning more Wolfpack tactics, consider subscribing. Roughly 80 to 60% of the people who actually end up watching the videos aren't even subscribed at all. So, help us out, drop us a sub, help us make YouTube into a full-time career, leave a positive rating. If you have any questions, be sure to let us know. We will do our best to answer them. Bless your faces, and deuces.